Usually in the cloud world, when it comes to different types of computing services that's provided to you, it is categorized under three categories majorly. And those categories are depending upon the degree of management that's needed from you. So let's say in this case, in on-premise infrastructure, if I say what is the degree of involvement of yours or degree of management of yours, it's 100%. Everything you have to do, otherwise things will not work. Similarly, there are other types of cloud providing categories, which is depending upon the degree of management that's needed from your side and the cloud provider side. So there are two parties here. One is the cloud provider, another is you. So a cloud provider can be Amazon Web Service or Azure or Google, and then they provide their service. So now it depends upon what kind of service you have chosen. Based on that, it will be depend upon how much involvement you have to put into, how much effort you have to put into there. So the first is infrastructure as a service. Second is platform as a service. Third is software as a service. Let's look at them one by one and try to understand with an analogy of an example. So let's say you have this desire to purchase a house, or let's say you have this desire to rent a house or purchase a house, doesn't matter. So in case of on-premise, let's say, then it's like an open land. There's nothing. There is nothing, and it needs your 100% involvement that you buy everything. You basically make sure the land is quite plain or flat. Then you make sure the foundation of the house is being dug. Then you make sure other aspects like construction happens, and then you make sure the uh, different kinds of people are that's are required, and different kind of raw material that's required is procured. Similarly, each and everything you have to do on the on-premise, which is kind of an open land example. Let's try to understand what is infrastructure as a service. So infrastructure as a service, there is a typo here. All right. So infrastructure as a service is an analogy to unfurnished apartment. So here you don't get on open land, but you get something. You get a house which has walls, roof, and now you have to make sure what kind of doors and windows you want, what kind of color or the paint you want in your house. You have to decide those things to that level. I mean, from that level onwards, you have to make it to a house where you can stay. So if you see in the on-premise, the degree of involvement was, let's say, 100%. In infrastructure as a service, the degree of involvement is slightly less. Let's say your degree of involvement is just 50% or 60%. So in case of example of a software, here you get a virtual machine. Let's say you get a virtual machine with the Windows operating system installed in it. You get a virtual machine with, let's say, uh, basically an Linux operating system installed in it. That's an example of this. And now on top of that, you have to install Java, you have to install Python or .NET, and then you can then deploy your application. So some part you already get, like the hardware, which is the machine, and the minimal the software like the operating system you get. But other part, which is like the application softwares, those things you have to take care. That's the level of involvement in infrastructure as a service. Now let's get back to PaaS, platform as a service. And this you can relate to, let's say, semi-furnished apartment. So what does it mean? Let's say You have the house, you also have the doors and windows in it, and it also has everything colored and painted. But what you need to do now is you need to get all the kitchen items, you need to get washing machine, you need to get dryer, you need to get your beds where you will sleep, you need to get a television. So those kind of things you can think of that the involvement level, let's say here it's just 30%, 70% of the work is already done. So if you try to relate with the real example, let's say you get a computer here with operating system installed. Let's say it has Windows or Linux operating system. It's 32 GB with a 300 GB hard disk. Everything is there. Also, the operating system is also in there like it used to be here. But here you also have the JDK installed. Let's say Java runtime is installed, or maybe Node runtime is already installed for you. And it is just that you just put your code here and it will start running. In the past, platform as a service, you just put your code, application code, and everything will start running. But in infrastructure as a service, you have to do something extra apart from putting your code to make sure it runs. And on premise, you have to build everything first, then you have to install the necessary softwares, then you can deploy your application and then it will run. So if you see from on-premise to infrastructure as a service to PaaS platform as a service, the level of your involvement is reducing. And let's talk about SaaS, software as a service. What happens here? Here you can think of it a fully furnished apartment. Let's call it as Airbnb. What you have to do? You just go, pay the money, you stay there, and you just leave it. You don't have to carry anything. It's a full-fledged furnished apartment that you get. You get a kitchen, you get everything. You don't have to worry about a single thing. It's all taken care by the host who is providing. But the host is going to charge you money here. Equivalent, so it will be little bit costlier compared to PaaS, and PaaS will be little bit costlier compared to IaaS, infrastructure as a service. So if we take example of SaaS here in the real world, you can think of Gmail, which is a SaaS service, or in this case, the Salesforce CRM is a SaaS service. The Dropbox is a SaaS service. Google Drive is a SaaS service. All that is a SaaS service. You just get the service, you pay some money, subscription fee, and you use them. So this is the different categories of the cloud models, or you can say cloud providers, cloud computing services, the types of cloud computing services that is provided, or you can also say cloud models, and they all depend upon the degree of your involvement. Always remember this. So you can remember this analogy about open land to unfurnished apartment to semi-furnished apartment to furnished apartment. Open land, you can consider everything you have to do like on-premise infrastructure. Here in the infrastructure as a service, you can think of it as you get a virtual machine with hardware and software, and now you get an operating system also. You have to install your application software and then deploy your application. In the past, you basically get everything. Now you get a hardware machine, your operating system is installed, your application software like the JDK or runtime environment like Node, Python is installed. What you only have to do here is you have to just put your application code. Rest is taken care. In the SaaS, it's even easier. You don't have to do anything. You just have to pay the money and use the service like Gmail or Google Drive or any other service like Salesforce. So after we have covered this one, let's look at in detail the responsibility chart wise how it looks for different services. So here blue means you manage and red means it's managed by the service provider, which means the cloud provider. So in the On premise, you see applications, data, application like the application that you want to host, data, which means you want to store in a database or what, then runtime, which is JDK or other stuff, middleware, operating system, virtualization, server, storage, networking, everything in the on premise or the on site, you have to take care. But infrastructure as a service, it's slightly less. You take care of certain things like application, data, runtime, middleware, and you choose the operating system while creating the machine. The virtualization and the actual hardware and the storage and the networking, all these things are taken care. The red ones, they are taken care by the cloud provider, let's say Azure or AWS or Google. Whoever service you use, they take care of these red ones. In the past, if you see, almost 80% of the things are already taken care by the cloud provider. What you only do is just take care of your application and the data, that how the data will be stored, where the data will be stored. You just take care of those things. In the SaaS, you don't have to worry about anything. Everything is taken care by the service provider. So this is the responsibility chart which helps you to understand the different cloud provider models. So on-site, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. And based on the responsibility or the ownership or the involvement of yours and the cloud provider, you decide these kind of models. And then with this chart, you know, if you pick up a one model, then what is your involvement, and you have to act accordingly on the cloud server or the cloud provider service. You have to act accordingly.